Hey, it's Zane and welcome back. Hope you're doing great today. And I just want to start the video by sending a big thank you to all of you for helping to support the channel and to getting me to 1,000 subscribers, which I reached yesterday. It wasn't really a goal of mine in the beginning to worry about subscribers, but I know that with putting out content, it's always good to know that people are actually picking up what you're putting down. And I guess in YouTube land, one of the greatest ways to kind of track that and to encourage you to keep going and keep sharing is to know that people want to hear from you often. So again, thank you, appreciate that, and let's keep this thing going. Let's keep this conversation rolling. Today I want to talk about why Bitcoin is the ultimate hedge. Bitcoin is the ultimate hedge. And you know, this is kind of spoken about sporadically. I've seen a number of different creators and YouTube podcasters in the Bitcoin space talk about this, and typically we talk about it as a hedge against inflation. And you know, I would agree that it's probably the most important hedge. We need to be able to protect and preserve our purchasing power. When you and I go and exchange our time and energy for this thing that we call money, which really is a currency, fiat currency, we want to be able to protect and preserve that economic energy for the future. And this is the, I guess, key point that most people simply do not understand, and yet it really is the most simple one to understand. And I know that you guys already would get this, and certainly if you're already on your Bitcoin journey, it means that not only have you got this as a really important thing to be acting upon, but you're actually doing something about it. And I think it's one thing for us to understand a problem, but it's another thing for us to actually take action. And those of you who are doing that, I just want to kind of salute you for being on the journey, being on board the life raft, and for taking action. But we want to hedge against inflation, and the reason we need that is because we have no control. You and I have no control over the monetary units that are actually created. So when it comes to the Australian dollar, the US dollar, the British pound, the euro, we have no control over how many monetary units are actually created. And so if our economic energy and output is represented by a small piece of a greater global or national economic pie, and then they go and increase the size of that pie, essentially our piece of that economic pie that's grown larger is actually being diluted. It's becoming smaller. And if everybody could just understand this one point, that their economic energy, through no fault of their own, if they store it in dollars in a currency that can be debased and inflated, it means their purchasing power is being diluted, which essentially means their financial future is being stolen. And I guess for me, this is the kind of onboarding mechanism for most people when it comes to Bitcoin. They have to understand that if they want to protect and preserve their purchasing power over the long term, they have to store it in a value system, which is really what Bitcoin is, that cannot be printed, that cannot be debased. A value system that has a fixed set of rules. And this is exactly what Bitcoin represents. And so we want to hedge against inflation. We have to do that if we want to protect and preserve our purchasing power into the future. And wealthy people know this. They've known this for the longest time. This is why people who have significant capital and you know, lots of cash and savings, surplus cash flow, they're always looking for places to store that value. And you know, typically one of the most popular stores of value, certainly in this country, has always been real estate. And so, you know, wealthy people know they need to protect their purchasing power. They know that if they, you know, save hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in the bank, that is going to get eaten alive through inflation. And it wasn't always this way, but certainly everybody knows that in the last, certainly since post-GFC, that this has been the case. So it's a hedge against inflation. The other thing we have to understand is that we want to be involved in Bitcoin because we need to have a hedge against the centralized system, the centralized banking system, the centralized government system, the centralized global agenda. We need to have a hedge against all of that, because like it or not, if we have all of our economic value parked in that centralized system, we are basically at the disposal of that system. We are at the whim of any policy decisions that are made that could affect our wealth, our economic value, our financial future. And, if we think about this in terms of banking, we know that we are a part of a system known as fractional reserve banking. Now, essentially what that means is that banks are not required to hold any reserve deposits on hand to facilitate the loans that they give out. And so there's a misconception out there that, say hello to Chili. Chili, say hello. There's a misconception out there that when you and I go and put our money in the bank, that money is then loaned out and rehypothecated or loaned out to those who go and borrow for a mortgage, for a car loan, or whatever it might be. But the reality is that banks don't need our deposits anymore. They can just loan out fractionally upwards of 10 times the amount of currency that are in their deposit reserves, and they actually don't need that anymore because everything is backed by the Reserve Bank or the centralized banking system. And so what it allows banks to do essentially is to loan out at will, and it allows them to just create new loans, which essentially is creating more inflation. And so a lot of people don't understand that when mortgages are issued, if somebody is issued with $1 million mortgage, that's an extra $1 million that is just digits on a screen, that is new currency that is created into the system. And so every time loans are issued, mortgages are issued, they're just propping up the debt bubble even further. And essentially, it's creating a bigger problem. It's creating a bigger debt bubble. And so we want protection from that, because the problem is that if you and I in a fractional reserve banking system go down to collect our money in a time of crisis, if we get nervous, if there's a pandemic, if there's a world war, if there's some form of capital controls where the government and or the bank has the ability to essentially temporarily suspend access to our accounts, or if we all go down and our relatives and friends, family go down to withdraw our money all of a sudden, the chances of that money being there are very, very slim. And I know this sounds crazy, but you only need to look at countries like Lebanon, 2019, like Cyprus, 2013, like the banks in Silicon Valley in 2023. And with 2023, I guess in the US, it was a little bit different because people's deposits were actually substantiated. People got their money because the Federal Reserve came to the party, but they're just creating more inflation. And we just have to know that we are at risk always whenever we have substantial holdings in the bank, and if we all go to collect it at the same time, our money's not there. And we know we only need to think back to 2020 that things can change at the flick of a switch, and they can basically institute any kind of controls that they want, and we're basically in their hands. And so Bitcoin is a hedge against that, because we take self-custody of our money. We take self-custody of our property, of our financial energy. We're able to actually be the absolute owner of that. And not just that, we're able to have it as a portable, permissionless monetary system that we can access without the need for any intermediary whatsoever. And so they're the two main hedges we want. We want a hedge against inflation, and we want a hedge against changes to rules, centralization that is becoming increasingly more controlling. As I've said in recent videos, we know that CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, are on the way in Europe. They've announced that they'll be coming out in October this year. And so, I believe that we're in an environment now where we have to be really thinking very seriously and outside the box about the state of the financial system and how it can impact our personal lives and that of our family. And if you care about that, then you need to be really, mindful of how you're actually protecting your wealth. And I can't think of a better way to do that other than making sure that you have at least some Bitcoin. And so if you already do, the next best thing is to ensure that you are actually taking it off the exchange into cold storage. And I would recommend a Bitcoin only air-gapped hardware wallet. There's a few of those on the market. You can do your own research and find a solution that makes sense for you. But Bitcoin only air-gapped open source hardware wallet is what I would suggest that you go for. But it's very important. A lot of people are good at taking the first step, which is buying some Bitcoin on an exchange. But the most important step is actually to secure your Bitcoin in the right way, in self-custody. And then the next most important step is to ensure that you actually hold on to that Bitcoin. And, there's a lot of, negative sentiment out there at the moment with this market pullback, a little bit of a correction. There's a lot of uncertainty with tariffs and those kinds of things that are going on in the market. But we have to understand that the trajectory and the future of Bitcoin is already set, and so we just need to use these opportunities as an opportunity, if we have spare capital, spare cash, spare savings, to actually acquire more Satoshis, and just realize that this is part of the journey. We're here for the long haul. We're here for the transformation of digital wealth. We're here for the new economy. We're here for the free market. And as Bitcoiners, we know that that's not a short game, that's a long game, and that's a game of discipline. It's a game of continuing to build your conviction and your learning. And it's a game of community. It's a game of us all banding together and realizing that we are part of the world's first and only true global free market. And I know that's really difficult for many people to get, but when you start to realize that Bitcoin represents the world's first only truly free market, you begin to start shifting your focus in your life and seeing the world differently, and seeing everything through a different set of eyes, and making changes to your situation to allow for that. So I want to leave it there today, but just remember that Bitcoin is a hedge, not just against inflation, but against centralized control that is becoming more and more prevalent. There's going to be changes to property rights, the ability for them to increase rates and land tax if you own real estate. You and I have no say in that. None of that applies to Bitcoin. And so we have to just keep remembering that if we can secure our value in this decentralized, immutable, digital technology, our financial lives in the future are going to be better for it. And our kids will also thank us for it. So I want to thank you for tuning in. A bit of a shorter video today, but I appreciate you being here. Please let me know your thoughts on everything that I shared today, and give the video a like if you haven't already, and please subscribe if you'd like to hear more from me and be a part of my community. I want to thank you for listening. This is Zane signing out. Have a great day. Chili wants to say goodbye. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.